It is essential to understand how America shaped its cultural and social outlook by the liberation of various oppressed sections in the society. Many times and often, these sections overlap. We will start looking into the race, then dive into how race melted when class formation took place, and then examine the smallest unit in society, the family, and the gender associated with it. We will examine the value of freedom and what it meant to the race, gender, and class oppression in America. Taking examples from the past to present, we will get a good limelight on how deep the problems were and how far we have reached. The freedom established and defined in different sections of the society added a sense of achievement in different areas of social values. In the early 17th century, at the peak of slavery, we see a race oppressed by the majority race. This difference in the skin color attributed to major divisions in the society at that time, one with the race and the other with the class. Class difference was more than just being white and black. It was between being humane and inhumane. The treatment towards lower class or the blacks were well described in Alexander Falconbridge's account of the slave trade, in which he mentions it as an excruciating pain which the poor sufferers feel from being obliged to continue in such a dreadful situation. Few, indeed, are able to withstand the fatal effects of it. But the economic conditions of the upper class affected the slaves during this period. This shows a very vital and proportional role on class and race at this time of history. In the writings of Richard Frethron, he explains the plight and life of slaves. He says, "But that Goodman Jackson pitied me and made me a cabin to lie in always when I come up, and he would give me some poor jacks to take home with me." Even though freedom did not nullify class difference, it released the chains of oppression, and it meant a lot to them. This was the second stage of history in race and class. Frederick Douglass says about this in his narration, "It was heard in every sound and seen in everything. It was ever present to torment me with a sense of wretched condition." What happens even if an oppressed race broke into freedom? The reintroduction into society as a regular citizen was not something this freedom provided. Even before the abolition of slavery, there were laws established in such a way that the freedom from the chains doesn't guarantee you the freedom of life in a society. Laws such as the 1651 sumptuary laws in Massachusetts is a prime example of capitalism and the wealth that leads to division among a community. The law reads, "It is therefore ordered by this court and authority thereof, that no person within this jurisdiction, nor any of their relations depending on them, whose visible estates, real and personal, shall not exceed the true and indifferent value of 200, shall wear any gold or silver lace, or gold and silver buttons, or any bone lace above 2 cents per yard, or silk hoods or scarves, upon the penalty of tens." At this point forward, wealth became the major restriction of equality, and capitalism started resonating across America, irrespective of race and color. As a society gets divided into different categories based on production and consumption, we will feel alienated from one another. Even with the capitalism trying to break community into categories, the laws made sure that a way of identification should be established. Examples like Lowell Mill Girl's story about factory life, Stuart Sterkel Great Depression interviews are prime examples for this. The oppression of the upper class was visible whenever the lower class chose options that hurt the upper class. Joining rallies were frowned upon as it conflicts with the capitalistic interest. The article about Lowell Mill Girl reads, "The overseer has been praising you for your work. He keeps telling you not to get involved in the protest business. He warns you that if your name gets into the blacklist for protesting, you will almost certainly lose this job and find it impossible to get another one." Similarly, we can see a reflection of this upper class tendency, a complete ignorance and lack of awareness of lower class people in the audio clip by Stuart Sterkel Great Depression interview.
How it struck me of their impression of the WPA, because before I could ever say my father was employed on the WPA, the discussions and bull sessions in our rooms immediately was the these lazy people that don't do a thing, the shovel leaners, and I just sit there and listen to them, and then I look around and I realize, sure, her father's a doctor in St. Joe, Michigan. Well, how nice. In my family, there was no respectable employment. There was no, until I thought, you don't know what it's like.
Similarly, one thing to note is that we are dealing with people of majority race in these two examples. Race had nothing to do with the capitalistic oppression during this time. If we examine the smallest unit of class, we see family, and how did family value change over these years. Let us look at the image of South Carolina slave community. The reason why I selected this is to evaluate more about the social life of slaves in that time period without family units, and how the weaker gender was viewed even in class struggle. The answer is simple. Women were object for men in the group and just another tool for the feudal owners. Forgetting the biological urge or pre-established social hierarchy, the female is considered as an instrument to men's need. In the image, the man to the left has his hand placed on the breast of the lady, while the other man tries to lure in the woman. Every century of history has a narrative role when it came to identifying gender roles. The gender role is forcefully established, and as a society started to weigh the bond of family from outside, males started getting predominant role and the female were pushed into household. The legal rights and existence of female were almost invisible. The gap in social status was visible when individually picked within the family unit. In the article, The Peculiar Responsibilities of American Women, Catherine Beecher explains this. In this country, it is established both by opinion and by practice that woman has an equal interest in all social and civil concerns. But in order to secure her the more firmly in these privileges, it is decided that in this domestic relation she takes a subordinate station, and that in civil and political concerns her interest be interested to other sex without her taking any part in voting or in making and administering laws. What about the freedom of someone who falls into all these categories? A black, working-class single mother. Let's look at the article Welfare is a Woman's Issue by John Timman. We see a very sad picture of a mother struggling through her life as a result of hard-earned right to divorce. She was thrown into the streets by the government and society. She says, because up until now we have been raised to expect to work all our lives for nothing, because we are the worst educated, the least skilled, and the lowest paid people there are, because we have to be almost totally responsible for our children, because we are regarded by everybody as dependents. This was in 1972, and to understand the gravity of the situation, men landed on the moon 3 years before that. Freedom through all these instances have been theoretical in today's society. We still live amidst these issues, and there is a very visible gap among races, class, and gender. Even when we reach the height of technological advancement, we have a history that states that with proper action and proper time, we will have the right result. Fighting for freedom comes with a struggle, no matter what the issue is. In an ideal world, we won't have to define freedom in limited terms. The balance between the gender might be a little uneven even today, but there is a visible movement towards an equally demanding gender roles. But one factor that never thought to be fit into the cultural paradigm of a society is a marriage among same sex. Even very recently, marriage is something strictly heterosexual, and as the ideology was based on an age-old system of conservative view. We won't have to see a small girl walked out of freedom to study anymore. We might not have to see someone killed for exercising their human rights written into the Constitution, but we are still far away in achieving complete equality that doesn't belong to any particular race, class, or gender. Unity in all terms should be similar and should be easily defined. Thank you.